if China had acted in a timely manner in that 3-week window when something could have been done, 95% of the cases of COVID would never have happened, and we would not now be in the grip of a global pandemic. That situation is what we are confronting day by day.
Can you explain further what the weaponisation of COVID means?
First of all, there was the control of the data, so that nobody else could say things about what was really going on and apportion blame in the way we've been talking about, because people simply were not confident about what we knew and did not know. It isn't just bureaucratic inefficiency, people in Wuhan scared of what their bosses in Beijing will say. This is a deliberate cover-up to maintain control, first and foremost, of what's happening inside China. We mustn't underestimate the importance of the Chinese government trying to control its own people and manage its own disasters, without, of course, the rest of the world knowing, but mostly because they're not sure of how Chinese people themselves will react. And the biggest concern at that time was what would happen if all this came out at the time of Chinese New Year. And of course, we now know that that was the worst miscalculation of all, to think you get away with allowing millions of people to travel around inside and out of China, and that would not inevitably result in what was an infection outbreak, becoming an epidemic, and then a pandemic. That was the massive error of judgment. But that error of judgment was made, I believe, in consciousness of the extent of the problem and the risks associated with it. An extraordinary state of affairs. When Chinese officials say something, that is what they are saying as the notional representatives of the Chinese people, and anybody who disagrees with that is therefore taking an anti-China position. And if you haven't got the strong enough evidence to prove it, there is this. The lie direct is an incredibly powerful political weapon used by totalitarian regimes, but the big lie is out there, and the people who are one way or the other captive by Chinese political and economic and other pressures have to toe the line. And if they don't support that kind of story, they're not members of the big China club. These kinds of stories continue, and they have been absolutely at the heart of Australia's response, Australia's efforts to establish the truth, which of course has been seen by the Chinese Communist Party as a direct attack on its authority and its nominal truthfulness. And that has resulted in the deterioration of relations and the economic blackmail that has been exercised against Australia, because the Australian Prime Minister said a WHO inquiry will not prove anything, a Chinese inquiry, it has to be independent. And that triggers a massive defensive, aggressive response on the part of China. And the same has happened to many other states who've taken a similar position.
So, forecasting, if you will, into the future, how do you expect the relationship between Australia and China to develop?
A great deal depends on the extent to which the Australian government feels able to separate what previously had been separated, the two boxes, one containing a political relationship and one containing the economic relationship. The extent to which the Chinese have weaponized this situation to increase their control over democracies, interfering in elections, interfering in elites various, interfering in parties, interfering in key national infrastructure, interfering in universities politically and as centres of excellence in research. There is no way that a healthy relationship between Australia and China can continue where essentially those aspects of the integrity of your economy are still susceptible to the kinds of risks that the Chinese have imposed upon them in recent years.
What is your view of China's positioning that they are the good guys in all of this, that the way they've managed the pandemic has been highly successful while the rest of the world has failed?
Yes, this is highly politicised, of course. It is a deliberate effort to take advantage of Western weakness at a time when democracies can be said, I'm afraid, reasonably, to have made not the best fist of all of this. It also shows how the West has failed to cooperate, whereas China has, over a massive area and with some of its partners, achieved what looks like a much more standardized approach, where you can move very rapidly and achieve very quick results in terms of test and trace. So that is undeniably a point. But this is not a medical campaign to say, listen, you must do as we do. It is a political campaign to say you are weak, your democracy doesn't serve the right purposes. Look at America, utter horror and chaos. Look at the United Kingdom, look at some parts of Europe as well. How on earth can you say that your system is better than ours when it is clearly incapable of doing anything other than making things worse? This is a very powerful political weapon, and it's being used very aggressively.